There are more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
And you have entered Sense of Beer Style land, and we're so excited. Julia and Jeremy here. We are in historical beer Sahti land, right? Sahti, another one of those beer styles that you don't see a lot when you're judging competition or at a brewery that brews it, or homebrewer's house that hands it to you. You want to drink this and try it and calibrate it, particularly because the brewing process is so unique. You're really not using hops in a prolific way, so it's not a boiled style beer. It is a surprising style of beer too, because of the ingredients that are chosen to be used. And this historically is a Finnish farmhouse beer from hundreds of years ago, right? And again, when people brewed beer and created styles, in the old world, they were using, and in the new world, they were using what was available to them. So juniper is a big component of this. I will point out that juniper does have a bit of a divisive nature, not necessarily for flavor components, although some people say, yeah, I don't like gin per se, which comes from juniper, but there's an allergen component. Some people are allergic to juniper. So if you don't know if you're allergic to juniper, just be forewarned, because this is heavy on it in many steps of the process. But yeah, this is a layered, super fun one, served fresh, brewed, and then often served quickly to celebrate things like weddings and special holiday occasions. So what a great story and setup for our sensory review of the style guidelines. Jeremy, talk to us about ingredients.
Yeah, this is a fun one. Early on, and as I was starting to become interested in beer and wanting to learn more about it, maybe become a professional in some aspect of beer. I lived in Central Oregon, and we had this museum of craft beer, an exhibit that was open for a few months. And one of the exhibits was a local brewer, Paul Arney from Ale Apothecary. Shout out to him. He actually fell a tree in his property, hollowed it out, and made a sahti out of it. And so this was
awesome.
And so they kind of showed this, like the whole process of how this was done. And I was not able to taste any of his. I've tasted it once, one other time. But this is a thing where, to make this beer, you need malted barley. You need other malted grains like rye. And you're gonna, if you're gonna do it the traditional way, you're gonna fall this tree and you're gonna hollow it out, and that's where you're going to mash your liquid, is in this hollowed out tree, kind of like, as if you're making a canoe, but you stop and say, hey, let's make some beer first. So that's where we're putting this mash in there. Hops are not essential, and if you do use hops, it's very few, because what they're going to use are these juniper boughs. They're going to use this to lauter the liquid, lauter the wort, or strain the liquid from all the grains. And at the same time, it's almost like acting as like a hop back, where you're getting some of that flavor from the juniper as well. The juniper boughs, the juniper berries, all that flavor is going in there. Typical yeast for this, from my best research, is Finnish baker's yeast. Although it does say that a German Weizen yeast is a good substitute, but either way, it does talk about a fast and warm fermentation, which kind of makes me wonder, did they use, was it kind of reminiscent of a Kveik yeast? I don't know the answer to that. If you do know, if you've brewed this, if you're from Finland and you drink this beer, please let me know. But there's that question of any fast and really warm fermentation. It kind of takes me to that. The other thing to note for this beer, this is a very, very interesting beer, is that they don't boil it. There's a lot of reasons why we boil the beer, a lot of that out of necessity, but this beer is not boiled. but it goes in this long, it's just that long mashing process with all the juniper boughs, like we just mentioned. And so that is the gist of the ingredients and this process when it's done traditionally. Let's get into the appearance when we finally put it in our glass.
Yes, I will. And when Jeremy's saying juniper boughs, he's meaning the branches, the berries, and the wood, right? There is many different places that juniper is used for this. The branches act as the filter, the berries act instead of hops, as your bittering agent, and
Mm-hmm.
the wood is into often the kettle because you're going to get tannins and even more flavor. So super cool example of using what's available to you indigenously and also kind of terroir wise. So love it. And when we finally do get to look at a beer like this in our glass, what we're looking at is a strata of color. So this is one of those styles that can totally confuse you if you just base your knowledge based on what it's supposed to be on a particular color. The SRM, and we'll talk about all the the numbers and the vital stats, but it's important on appearance to say that's 0 to 15. First of all, 0 is kind of weird. It kind of means yellow or straw, as pale as you can get. And then
Mm-hmm.
15 would be getting up into the brown range. So appearance could be yellow to brown. Think about that as a spectrum of color. So don't make assumptions about what this beer should be, knowing that. And then you're going to get, though, the majority are going to land in kind of that middle range of dark or medium amber. And then they are going to be cloudy. They're allowed to be turbid. This is not a bad thing. This is what this style is about. And then you're not going to really have a lot of collar of foam or head retention because of the aspect of what the process and the ingredients. So you're just not going to be looking for that standard collar of foam.
Yeah. So when we finally start smelling this beer, we're going to get a sense of graininess. We're going to get a sense of that malt that went in there. We're going to smell like unfermented beer or wort. We'll get a sense of caramel. Now we can't call it sweetness because we don't smell sweet, but we're going to smell all these things that make us think, "Ooh, I'll bet this is going to be sweet." Uh, but we might even get some of this juniper, which is kind of like a sweet berry with a bit of a medicinal herbal aroma and flavor. If you've never had this, then even if you don't like gin, for those people, because I know people, you're either into gin or you're into vodka, doesn't matter. But you can get juniper berries and you can press those and put those in your gin and tonic or your vodka tonic or your whatever. And it just has this beautiful little flavor that comes through there. But you can get quite a bit of banana coming through there and moderately to moderately high clove flavor, much like the Weizen yeast, particularly if you use Weizen yeast, but it can also come out with this baker's yeast as well. But just to reiterate, we talked about this with ingredients. Don't expect any hops. We should not get any hops or any hop bitterness coming out of this. Or, of course, we're talking about aroma, but we shouldn't smell any hops coming through this aroma. And hopefully that translates all over to flavor.
Right on. And I would say that flavor is that sweet that Jeremy is saying the aroma's eliciting, right?
Yep.
Making you think warty, and think almost didn't finish out fermenting type of wort. If you've ever had the chance to taste that, or if you're in a brewery and they can pigtail off of one of their just brewed batches of beer that's been cooled, that's kind of what you're looking for, at least in the initial flavor when it comes to the actual grains and malt that have been added. Caramel and toffee are definitely coming to mind. I kind of think of Malta, that drink, right?
Mhm.
But not, there's many different flavors, but the base is that really malty kind of sweet liquid. Jeremy said no hop flavor, and then you're getting kind of a woody or pine character. And bananas and fruitiness. If you're using the yeast that is the Weizen ale yeast, then possibly you will get that clove, that vanilla, that spicy, and that banana essence. And you're just flavor wise, it's a sweet finish. We'll talk final gravity in a minute. And they should be definitely, and I'm scripting the style guidelines here, admittedly so, because that's our job.
Mhm.
It's going to finish sweet, not sour. It shouldn't be sour. If they're
Mhm.
sour, I would say that this didn't get served fresh and it went sour. It's soured and could be fine. But they're supposed to be sweet, not sour.
Yeah. But if it's sour, then it has turned, if you know what I mean.
Right.
When we get to mouthfeel, so keep in mind for all of you who have brewed, you'll intuitively know this. But those of you who have not brewed before, if we don't boil the beer, then we're not going to have that hot break. That hot break is that time in the boil when all the proteins start to break down and coagulate. And so we're not going to have that. And when those proteins coagulate together, eventually they're going to flock out or drop out. And so we're not going to have that in the body. This doesn't happen with this beer. There's no boil. There is no hot break. So all of that stuff is still floating around that liquid and is going to end up on our palate. Therefore, it's going to be a very high body, very big body. It's going to be thick. It's going to be viscous. And so just prepare yourself to have a beer like that. We're going to have no to very low carbonation. That's just the way that they do it. But you can expect a fairly high alcohol warming. That's kind of part of the charm with this thing too, especially with that vigorous, fast fermentation. So that's the kind of mouthfeel that we can look for. When we get into style comparison, I'm glad you chose this one, Julia. This one's kind of fun.
Well, it's easy, style comparison. And again, this is the best. Hopefully you're drinking one of these, right? And if you're not, you're drinking the style comparison to get in the mood. And so we're going to talk about Weizenbachs, right? Bock beers. Bock beers have Dunkels, Bock beers have a variant of versions of them. And the Doppelbock is such a beautiful beer. And then if you use Weizen ale yeast, which is its own classic German ale yeast, that Weizenbach, that's what you want to taste this next to. And then the Sahti next to it will have that rye and juniper character. It's not exactly the same, but they're two very good ones, kind of kissing cousins, shall I say, to try next to each other. And that's the biggest style comparison. You could probably go much further, but that to me would help you nail it down.
Yeah, perfect. And this is going to be real easy with commercial examples. There are none listed. What you're looking for, and for those of you who have traveled, you've probably found some, but what you're looking for is the word Sahti, Sahti. If you find that, chances are you found a Sahti. And again, if you can find it, great. For those of you who are brewers, this is kind of a challenging brew. This is more of an advanced brew because if you're going to do it traditionally, well, first you have to start by chopping down a tree and hollowing it out before you even get to the brewing process. So keep in mind that, this is historical. This is hard to find, but if you travel to Finland, chances are you're going to have a good chance of finding it. So that's where we are with the style comparison. I'm sorry, with the commercial examples, but let's talk about the vital stats.
So vital stats will bring you to, just remember I was talking about that SRM range, IBU range. We've already said 0 to 15. So it's a spectrum. This is a style that has spectrum in most of its vital stats. Original gravity of 1076 to 1120. What the what? Like, that's such a broad range. But so tell yourself to remember it. Sahti can be 1076 to 1120. And then final gravity, where you've got those fermentable sugars, and now you've had your yeast produce your carbon dioxide and ethanol alcohol. Final gravity is 1016 to 1038. That's another what the what?
Huge.
But 1016, double it, gets you into the 1038 range, right? And then ABV, or alcohol by volume, is 7 to 11%. Not as broad of a range, but 7 to 11%. This is one you will notice when you taste it of, whoa, it's definitely got some alcohol. It's some warming effect. And so I mentioned international bitterness units, 0 to 15. That's certainly a wacky range. And then standard reference method is 4 to 22. So that really wacky color that we talked about range, to not make assumptions. 4 to 22 is so broad, but we are going to allow ourselves to admit that most of them are going to end up in the actual kind of dark amber range. And Jeremy, do your conversions, and we'll take it home from here.
For all the conversions, for you, European Brewery Convention folk, we're looking at 8 to 44. Still, we're looking at a pale yellow to a brown. And for the original Plato, there's a lot of sugar there. So we're looking at 19 to 30. And that final Plato, we're looking at 4 to 9.5. But with those numbers, I mean, the only other beer that is potentially one of the few only beers that reach that high with that final gravity, final Plato would be the Icebox. So this is a big beer. So that's the vital stats. When we get into the glass and the temperature to this, frankly, I'm looking for a Weizen vase, but I'm a little wary because at 7 to 11%, then maybe I don't need a full 19.2 ounces of this thing. Maybe I need to kind of pace myself, especially this is a party beer. This is a celebration beer. I don't want to end my night too soon. So I could easily be talked into a tulip to go with this. Just kind of keep it cool. Temperature wise, I'd like this kind of cold. Probably 40, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe 5 to 6 degrees Celsius. And if you talk me into, or you could talk me into trying it a little bit warmer, I'd like to see what this thing can do when it opens up. As far as food pairing goes, where would you go, Julia?
We often do suggest avoiding so many of the hoppy styles with, say, something like salmon. You have a chemical interaction that happens with the omega acids, the fatty acids, and really turns it even more fishy and metallic. So here's a great example of something that often doesn't have hops. So I find myself wanting this with smoked salmon, and smoked salmon can be served in so many ways. Cold over crackers with Boursin cheese and a little fresh dill, right? It can be grilled on the campfire and served over white rice with a little coconut milk. The malt in this, that essence of that rich unfermentable sugar, and then the rye or the oats are really going to, I think, bring things to the table that are going to just kind of hug the salmon in a beautiful way. And then the junipers, if you're into juniper, and heck yeah, bring me the gin and tonics. And yes, please sign me up for things with gin. I mean, you go hiking in the Colorado Front Range or mountains where I live, and juniper berries, and we're picking them off the different types. There are different types of juniper bushes too, all the time. They're really herbal, a little medicinal, think botanical. And so that's why I like the idea of like the Boursin cheese or alouette and a little bit of dill, and just kind of the juniper is going to find its way to so many, I think, herbs and spices. So use this beer for the malt and the residual sugar and the essence of the rye, but then also pay attention to the juniper flavors.
Yeah, and I think about that too. That flavor of juniper is really nice when it's not overdone. And so, I'm kind of thinking more along the lines of like apples and brie along with that. Or maybe, if this is a celebration beer, I'll bet this would be fantastic with an Italian wedding soup.
Nice.
Get some of these flavors where you have this meat, you have the pasta, you have the herbs, it's kind of like a whole shebang. And without a ton of experience drinking a Sahti, that's kind of what I'd want to try first to kind of get my bearings and see where I'd want to go next.
I love it. And we welcome any ideas and suggestions. We hope you find this beer, brew this beer, enjoy this beer, and you are on the journey with us. We're on it with you. Thanks for listening to A Sense of Beer Style.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
and me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.